بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So now then, we're on the next chapter, which is the actual description of the prayer. Because last time we finished the conditions of the prayer, the different conditions, the shurut, those are the things that are needed prior to starting your prayer for your prayer to be valid. Now the actual prayer itself, breaking down all of the sections, how you're supposed to pray according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, Sheikh Uthaymeen, he says here, يجب أن نعلم أن من شرط العبادة الإخلاص والمتابعة للرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. إذن لا بد أن ندرس كيف كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي. He says it is upon us all to know that a condition of worship is sincerity and to follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's why we all need to learn exactly how the Messenger used to pray. Because for any act of worship to be valid and accepted, then it requires two conditions: sincerity and following the sunnah, al-ikhlas wal-mutaba'ah. So the part regarding following the sunnah, that can only be done in the prayer if we know in detail what the description of the prayer is. And before we get into it, it should be known that the description of the prayer for men is the same as the description for the prayer of the women, unless there is something specific mentioned anywhere. Otherwise, the description we go through is the same for men and women. So, Sheikh Uthaymeen then says, وذلك لأن الله عز وجل أمرنا بإقامة الصلاة. قال تعالى: وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة واركعوا مع الراكعين. In the Quran you will notice, in the Sunnah you will notice, it says إقام الصلاة or إقامة الصلاة. That means establishing the prayer. In the Quran, we are commanded not just to pray, but to establish the prayer. And there's a difference between just praying and between establishing the prayer. There is a difference between the two of them. Establishing the prayer is praying the prayer in the proper manner according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with all of the conditions, with all of the pillars, with all of the obligations, all of the sunnahs, with everything in place according to how the Messenger taught us. When you pray like that, then you are establishing the prayer. Whereas somebody who comes along and just prays and makes mistakes in their prayer, isn't doing it how the sunnah taught us, then he has prayed maybe, he's prayed, but he hasn't established the prayer. The establishment of the prayer is doing it within the times and with all of the pillars, all of the obligations, and all of the sunnah acts. That is the proper completion of the prayer. Because the scholars, they say there are two descriptions of the prayer. There are two descriptions of the Prophet's prayer. One is the general description with the pillars and the obligations. If you do the pillars and you do the obligations, then your prayer is valid. But the second description of the prayer is the complete and perfect description of the prayer. That is when you have the pillars and the obligations and the sunnahs within it. Then you have prayed in the perfect way. As the Prophet ﷺ said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray as you have seen me pray. Pray as you have seen me pray. And that is with the pillars and the obligations, but also with the sunnahs of the prayer. There are lots of things within the prayer that are classified as sunnahs of the prayer. If you miss them, your prayer would still be valid, but it wouldn't be perfect. Doing the prayer with the sunnahs included, that's when your prayer is then perfect. So, the establishment of the prayer, it is when you pray with that perfection. There's a famous example in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a famous hadith known as the Hadith al-Musi' fi salatih. The hadith about the man who prayed badly. Famous hadith, because there are some hadith in the Sunnah that have names. They are famous by those names. Like the hadith of Jibril. That hadith is known by that name, the hadith of Jibril. And everybody knows that hadith. There is this other one known as the hadith of the man who prayed badly. And it's a famous hadith. Anytime you mention that name, the hadith of the man who prayed badly, everybody knows what that hadith is. It's a hadith about a man who walked into the mosque one time and the Prophet ﷺ was sitting in the mosque. So this particular man entered the mosque and the messenger was just sitting on one side of the mosque. And the man came in and the first thing he did was go across and pray his 2 raka'at. Tahiyatul masjid or whatever, went and prayed his 2 raka'at first. Then he came and gave salam to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who was sitting in one side of the mosque. And when he came and gave salam, obviously the messenger had seen him pray. The man had walked in and prayed. The messenger was sat there in the mosque. He had noticed and observed how the man was praying. So when the man had finished and came over to give salam to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the messenger replied the salam to him, wa alaykum as-salam, wa alayka as-salam. And then he said to him, irji' fasalli, fa innaka lam tusalli. After returning the salam, the messenger said to the man, go back and pray again, you didn't pray. Go back and pray again, you didn't pray. So the man went back and he prayed again. And after finishing his prayer, he came back and gave salam to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam again. And again, the Prophet had observed how he had been praying. And when he came to give salam, the messenger said to him, replied the salam to him, and then said, irji' fasalli fa innaka lam tusalli. Go back and pray again. You didn't pray. So then the man went again, 3rd time. And he prayed, and again the messenger was observing. And when he came back and gave salam, the messenger said to him, the salam, returned it, and then said to him, go back and pray. You didn't pray. This time the man said, O Messenger of Allah, that's all I know. That's how I pray. I don't know how to pray any better than that. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. That is how I've learned to pray. That's all I know. That's how I pray. I don't know basically what mistake I'm making or what I'm doing wrong. So then when the man said that, he then said to the messenger, Allimni, teach me then. Teach me how I'm supposed to pray. Because obviously now the man realized he's doing something wrong in his prayer. So wrong that the messenger keeps telling him, that's not prayer, go back and pray again. After he tries 2 times or 3 times, he says, oh messenger, that's all I know. I don't know how to do it any better. So teach me, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to pray to fix the mistakes that I'm making, whatever those mistakes are? So that's when the messenger explained to him how to pray. And the first thing the messenger said to him was, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَأَسْبِغِ الْوُضُوءِ. The messenger said to him, so when you get up to pray, when you're going to pray, then firstly, perfect your wudu. That's the first thing. Make a good and proper wudu. Then after that, ثُمَّ اسْتَقْبِلِ الْقِبْلَةِ فَكَبِّرْ. Then face the Qibla and say the takbir, Allahu Akbar. And then the hadith it continues and explains the whole prayer, describes what to do. So that is the hadith known as the hadith of the one who prayed badly. If anybody ever mentions that, you know what the narration is. About the man who walked in, went and prayed, came and gave salam. The messenger replied and said, go and pray again, you didn't pray. He tried 2 times, 3 times. Eventually he said, I don't know how to pray any better than that. That's all I know, so teach me. So then the messenger taught him, broke it down, how to pray the full prayer. Sheikh Uthaymeen then also mentions جاءت كيفية الصلاة في القرآن الكريم مطلقة ولم تبين بيانا كاملا. The prayer is mentioned in the Quran in a general sense. In the general sense of praying, it's mentioned in the Quran. But the details, the specific breakdown of how you're supposed to pray section by section, that is not in the Quran. So, Sheikh Uthaymeen is now going to start breaking it all down section by section. He says, firstly then, يخرج الرجل من بيته متطهرا من الحدث الأصغر والأكبر والنجاسة بسكينة ووقار قاصدا الصلاة. That a person leaves, or a man leaves his house upon purification. So it is good and better you make your wudu at home before you go to the mosque, that you leave your home in a state of purification and without any impurities on you or your clothes. You go out clean and pure upon wudu to go and pray. وَوَقَارٍ بِسَكِينَ وَوَقَارٍ. And it is from the sunnah that when you go to the mosque, you go calmly. That you go to the mosque in a calm way, not rushing, not hectic, but in a calm and collected manner you go to the mosque. Even if you're late, even if you are late, you still go to the mosque in a calm and collected manner. Peacefully, quietly, calmly, you head to the mosque, even if you're late. Because there is a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا سَمِعْتُمُ الْإِقَامَةِ فامشوا إلى الصلاة وعليكم بالسكينة والوقار ولا تسرعوا. In Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, إذا سمعتم الإقامة, فامشوا إلى الصلاة وعليكم بالسكينة والوقار ولا تسرعوا. In Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, إذا سمعتم الإقامة فامشوا إلى الصلاة وعليكم بالسكينة والوقار ولا تسرعوا. that the Prophet ﷺ said, when you hear the iqamah, if you hear the iqamah, then walk to the prayer calmly, in a calm and collected manner. Even though you've heard the iqamah, so you are now late. But the Messenger said, calmly, calm and collected, walk to the mosque. وَلَا تُسْرِعُوا, and don't rush. So a person is not supposed to rush or run and be all hectic going towards the mosque, but you go in a calm and collected manner. لأنك مقبل على الله عز وجل والسكينة في القلب والوقار في الهيئة. Because you are now approaching to worship Allah, and so you have that tranquility in your heart and that calmness in your movements. ويقول صلى الله عليه وسلم, and the Messenger mentioned, فَمَا أَدْرَكْتُمْ فَصَلُّوا وَمَا فَاتَكُمْ فَأَتِمُّوا. The Messenger said, whatever you catch, then pray that, and whatever you miss, then complete that. Meaning, go calmly to the mosque, whatever you catch, second raka'ah, third raka'ah, then pray that with the Imam, and then whatever you missed, complete it at the end. That is the manner. The manner is not to run and rush to the mosque. There is the famous hadith of Abu Bakr, not Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, another companion, Abu Bakr. One time he was running to the mosque. He ran to the mosque. I think it might come later on. When he ran to the mosque, when he walked in, the Prophet ﷺ was already in ruku'. The rows at the front of the mosque, they were already in ruku', and he walked in from the back of the mosque. So now he had to go across to get to the rows at the front, the congregation. He feared that from the back of the mosque to walk to the front where the rows were, by the time he gets there, the Messenger might say, Sami Allahu liman hamidah, and he might miss the raka'ah. So in the hadith it mentions when he walked in from the last line, from the last row, he just said Allahu Akbar, and he went into ruku' by himself. And as he was in the ruku' position, he walked and joined the row, so that he could make sure he was in ruku' before the Messenger said Sami Allahu liman hamidah. That's what happened in the narration. He walked in, he saw them on the front row already in ruku'. So he did the takbir Allahu Akbar and went into ruku', and he's at the back. And then in ruku' he walked forward and joined them in ruku'. After the prayer, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, زادك الله حرصا ولا تعد. That may Allah increase you in your enthusiasm. And in one narration, one version it says, وَلَا تَعُدْ, but don't do that again. Don't do what again? Messenger said to him, may Allah increase you in your enthusiasm, but don't do that again. Don't do what again? Walk in the ruku'. Maybe that could be the meaning. Don't do that again, meaning don't start your prayer, you haven't even joined the line yet, and then walk in the ruku'. Maybe. Many of the scholars, though, they say that the meaning can't be that. Because if that was the meaning, if the Messenger was saying, you can't do that, don't do that again, you can't join the prayer like that in the ruku' and then walk up, that doesn't count like that. If that's what the Messenger meant, the Messenger would have also said to him, make up that raka'ah. Because right now, he caught the raka'ah. If you catch the ruku', you've caught the raka'ah. So he caught the raka'ah. He didn't make that one up again at the end. If that was wrong, if that's what the messenger was telling him, don't do that again, meaning that's wrong, then he would have said to him, make that raka'ah up. It doesn't count like that. But the messenger never said that to him. Never said to him, make up that raka'ah again. Never said to him, you have to make it up or repeat it. So that shows that wasn't what the messenger meant. Don't do that again. That technically was valid. His prayer was valid. But there was something else, because there's another version or another understanding of the narration that the messenger said, زَادَكَ اللَّهُ حِرْصًا وَلَا تَعْدُ. May Allah increase you in your enthusiasm, but don't run. Because he was late, he had run to the mosque and only caught them in the ruku'. He had run. So when the messenger said to him, may Allah increase you in your enthusiasm, but don't run. Don't run to the mosque. Come calmly. Whatever you catch, you catch. Whatever you don't, you make it up at the end. So the first thing the Sheikh mentions is the calmness that a person is supposed to be upon when approaching the prayer. It's not supposed to be rushed and hectic, but calm and collected and tranquility in your heart as you approach to pray. And as we know, regarding walking to the mosque, then all of those steps are counted towards the reward. In the narration it says, لَمْ يَخْطُ خُطْوَةً إِلَّا رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ بِهَا دَرَجَةً وَحَطَّ عَنْهُ خَطِيئَةً. That a person does not walk a step except that Allah raises him a level by every step and removes a sin by every step. So every step is increasing you in a level and removing from you a sin. Then as you enter the mosque, it is sunnah to enter with which foot? The right foot. It's sunnah to enter with the right foot. And it is sunnah to say, Bismillah, wassalamu ala rasulillah, Allahumma ghfir li dhunubi, waftah li abwaba rahmatika. Oh Allah, forgive for me my sins and open up the doors to mercy for me. Open up the doors to mercy, to your mercy for me. And it's mentioned, there are other du'as as well, but that is the famous one. Most people will know. Allahumma ghfir li dhunubi waftah li abwaba rahmatik. Allahumma aftah li abwaba rahmatik. Oh Allah, open up the doors of your mercy as you walk in to the mosque. Also, just before you are about to start the prayer, it is sunnah to use the siwak. It is sunnah to use the siwak just before you start praying. And so now we are at the stage where you have come, you are in the row, you are lined up in the row, you're using your siwak. You are now obviously therefore fulfilling the condition of facing the qibla. You're in the line, in the row, with your wudu. Your intention is made. You are facing the qibla with calmness and tranquility. And then the first thing that you do is, of course, to start the prayer you have to say, Allahu Akbar, the Takbiratul Ihram. That is known as Takbiratul Ihram, like Ihram in Hajj and Umrah. Ihram, Takbiratul Ihram. Ihram sounds very similar to the word haram, because it's from the same family tree of words. Ihram, Takbiratu, the takbir of Ihram, and Ihram when you go on Hajj and Umrah, all same. They have a connection to the word haram. Haram means something which is not permissible, not allowed. And that's what it means here. Takbiratul Ihram means the takbir to make things impermissible. But you're about to start praying. So what's impermissible things got to do with it? When you say Allahu Akbar, that's known as the takbir of making things impermissible. What has become impermissible? You're praying.
There's certain things that when you're in a state of prayer that are impermissible, that are normally permissible outside of prayer, like talking.
Exactly. So when you start praying, are you allowed to talk now? When you say Allahu Akbar, are you allowed to talk to anybody now? Not allowed to talk, even if somebody sneezes and says Alhamdulillah, are you allowed to say Yarhamakallah? Not allowed. There's a hadith, one companion did it once and the messenger told him, that's not allowed to reply to somebody Yarhamakallah. But what if you sneeze yourself? Are you allowed to say Alhamdulillah? You can do that quietly to yourself. But nobody can reply to you. You cannot talk in the prayer. You cannot eat. Allahu Akbar. You can't eat now. If you have something in your mouth, when you say Allahu Akbar, you have something in your mouth, you're not allowed to swallow it. Get rid of it and continue. So now all of a sudden when you say Allahu Akbar, eating is now impermissible. Talking is now impermissible. Movement is now impermissible. You can't walk around, do anything. You're in that position now. You can't just make movements. So lots of things now become impermissible for you to do after you say Allahu Akbar and start. And that's the same with Umrah and Hajj. That's why it's known as the state of Ihram. Because when you go into the state of Ihram, and remember, Ihram isn't the white clothes. They call that the Ihram. But the state of Ihram is when you make your intention to do Umrah or Hajj, and now it becomes haram and impermissible for you to cut your nails, for you to cut your hair, to hunt the animals. Many things become impermissible after you go into the state of Ihram for Umrah or Hajj. So that's what it means, Takbiratul Ihram. When you say Allahu Akbar, and now it's haram to do talking, eating, moving, all the other things. So the Sheikh says, Yanwi wa yukabbir. So you make your intention and say Allahu Akbar. And that is the only statement you can say to start the prayer. If somebody came along and said, Subhanallah, the prayer invalid. They haven't even prayed. They haven't even started their prayer. Somebody says, Alhamdulillah. Wrong, no prayer. La ilaha illallah. No prayer. It has to be Allahu Akbar. That is the only statement to begin the prayer, to enter into the prayer with. So that first takbir is an absolute necessity. That is the entrance into the prayer. If you don't do that first takbir, you never started your prayer. You can't just go with Fatiha and begin there. You're not praying. You never went into the prayer to begin with. To go into prayer, the only way to do that is Allahu Akbar. Now you are in the prayer. Without that, if you begin with A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Alhamdulillah, you're not in the prayer. So you must begin with Takbiratul Ihram. That cannot be forgotten. And the proof of that is in the hadith of the one who prayed badly. Because when the man eventually said, Teach me, O Messenger, what do I do then? The first thing the Messenger said to him was, face the Qibla and do the Takbiratul Ihram. So that is established and proven. Also, as Sheikh Uthaymeen says, and this is common, that you must know how to say that properly. Allahu Akbar. Because some people, he says, and you hear this, when people say, so they make their intention and then they say, Allahu Akbar. You have people doing it. Sometimes the elderly people doing it. Allahu Akbar. The extension of the alif at the beginning makes it wrong. Allahu Akbar. The extension of the alif at the beginning makes it wrong. It's Allahu Akbar, not Allahu Akbar. The at the beginning completely changes it, because what does it mean in Arabic when you say Allahu Akbar? The extension of the alif now makes it mean is Allah the greatest? It becomes a question in Arabic. By extending the alif at the beginning, that now becomes a question in that type of grammar, in that type of phrase. Allahu Akbar is understood as, is Allah the greatest? And obviously that's completely not what you're supposed to be saying. You're saying Allah is the greatest. So then in that case, that would be false and incorrect. So if you say Allahu Akbar, it changes the meaning. What about when somebody might say Allahu Akbar? So now they've extended the alif in Akbar. Allahu Akbar. That again, by extending the alif in the Akbar, is invalid too. That is invalid too, because Akbar has another different meaning in the Arabic language. So the point is that you have to make sure that you are pronouncing it properly. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. So that is the Takbiratul Ihram. What do you do with your hands when you're saying that? Where do your hands go? So the hands have to be raised up. How do you raise those hands up? That is mentioned in the hadith, and actually there are different ways. There are different ways of raising the hands at the beginning. One method is that you raise the hands as you are saying Allahu Akbar. So it's Allahu Akbar at the same time. As you are saying Allahu Akbar, you are raising your hands at the same time. Allahu Akbar. So both actions, or the statement and the action, simultaneously. Allahu Akbar. There is another method of doing it, which is that you can raise the hands before you say Allahu Akbar. So you could do Allahu Akbar. You already raised your hands before you said Allahu Akbar. That's okay. You could do that. Allahu Akbar. So now you didn't say the statement alongside the raising of the hands. You did the hands, then you said Allahu Akbar. That's okay. That is okay. Another method of doing it is that you raise the hands after you say Allahu Akbar. So it's Allahu Akbar. So you've made the statement, then you raised your hands. All three of those methods are okay. Either raising your hands alongside simultaneously when you make the statement Allahu Akbar, or that you raise the hands, then say Allahu Akbar afterwards, or that you say Allahu Akbar, then raise the hands, or the other way around, raise the hands after you say Allahu Akbar. Either before you say it, or after you say it, or during when you say it. Three combinations. To raise the hands during when you are saying Allahu Akbar, to raise the hands before you say Allahu Akbar, or to raise the hands after you say Allahu Akbar. So three easy ways to remember. Raise your hands with Allahu Akbar, raise your hands before you say Allahu Akbar, raise your hands after you say Allahu Akbar. All three of those are correct. All three of those are valid. All three of those are permissible and okay. The question is, now that we know when you raise your hands, and you can do it at any time, before you say Allahu Akbar, after you say it, during it. The question is, how do you raise them now? We know when you raise them, but how do you raise them? So, again, this has a few different narrations as to how you raise the hands. One of the narrations, or some of the narrations, they mention that you raise your hands to the level of your shoulders. So it's Allahu Akbar, to the level of your shoulders. That is one opinion. Allahu Akbar, to the level of your shoulders. Another opinion, another narration, in fact, not opinion, narrations. These are narrations that exist. Another narration says, you raise them up to your ears. Allahu Akbar, up to your ears. And another narration says, so that second narration says, level with your ears. Level with your ears. Allahu Akbar, level to your ears. The third opinion is that your hands go to the tips of your ears. So that's a bit lower, the third opinion, lower than the second opinion. Second opinion, level with your ears. Third opinion, to the bottom of your ears. Allahu Akbar. All three of those are okay. All three of those are mentioned in the Sunnah. That you raise your hands to the, if you go from top to bottom, you raise your hands to the same level as your ears. Or you raise your hands to the bottom of your ears. Or you raise your hands only up to your shoulders. All three of those are okay. Any one of those is permissible and correct. And because there are narrations about all of them, then it's possible that you can mix that up. In one prayer, intentionally remember and raise your hands up to your ears when you say Allahu Akbar. In another prayer, only up to your earlobes when you begin. In another prayer, maybe only up to your shoulders. You can mix it up. And where you raise your hands up to when you start the prayer, because all of those are established in authentic narrations. There does not appear to be any narration, though, that says you have to touch your ears. Allah Alam, I'm not aware of any narration. I don't remember any narration like that which says that you have to touch your ears. Allahu Akbar. I don't know anything about touching the ears, but these narrations there, they tell you up to the level of the ears, or at the bottom level of the ears, or at the shoulder level. So now we know when you raise your hands, we know how you raise your hands, or in fact in terms of how you raise your hands, the palms of the hands are supposed to be forward. So you don't say Allahu Akbar sideways, but the palms should be out forwards. Allahu Akbar. Not sideways on coming into your face, but outwards forward. Allahu Akbar. So why do we raise the hands during the opening takbir? What is the wisdom in raising the hands in the opening takbir of the prayer? Firstly, because we are following the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is what he commanded us to do, to raise the hands when you make the opening takbir. And some of the scholars, they said that the raising of the hands in the opening takbir, it is as a type of indication, as though you are removing a veil. If you had some type of cloth on you, you would remove it with that kind of movement. You would take that cloth off you with that kind of movement with your hands. Some scholars said this movement resembles that. If you had a big cloth on you, if you're getting rid of that, you would use your hands and pick it up off yourself like this. So your movement of your hands would be like the movement of the opening takbir. Some scholars said maybe that resemblance has some meaning to it. That maybe there's a symbolic meaning as though you are raising the cover from yourself to now face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship. Symbolically, as though you are removing the cover from yourself now to stand in front of Allah. That is, of course, just an explanation. It's not in the Sunnah, that's what it means. But an explanation of the scholars that this could be a symbolic meaning, as though you are now raising the veil to face directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your heart and your body to pray. Some of the mistakes that people make when raising their hands. One of the mistakes is when people raise their hands too low. The minimum we said is up to your shoulders. Some people, they come along and it's Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. They didn't go higher than their chest. You see people, they come along, Allahu Akbar. Like they barely move their hand up. It's not going above the level of the chest, not even getting to the shoulders. Allahu Akbar. And that's it. That's incorrect. That is an incorrect movement of the hand. The sunnah is not at the level of the chest, it's at the shoulders at least. So people, when they come in and they just do this, Allahu Akbar, and their hands haven't gone anywhere, just at the chest where they were, then that is not the sunnah like that. In fact, now we get to this other part. The Sheikh says, it is not from the sunnah to put your fingers on your ears when you make the takbir. Allahu Akbar. That is not from the sunnah to do that. And neither is it from the sunnah to even touch the ears at all. It is not from the sunnah to touch the ears when making the takbir, as many people do. Allahu Akbar, touching the hands, the ears. So now we've learned how to do the takbiratul ihram, when to do it, where to raise the hands up to, and the mistakes that are made in it. After you've done it, where do your hands go now? The right hand goes on top of the left hand. Or in some narrations on top of the left wrist, and in some narrations on top of the left forearm. All of those are okay. The right hand, the key is that the right one goes on top of the left. Either directly on top of the hand, or on top of the wrist, or on top of the forearm area. But the key is the right one goes on top of the left one. That is mentioned in Al-Bukhari. كان الناس يؤمرون أن يضع الرجل يده اليمنى على ذراعه اليسرى في الصلاة. This version, that the people used to be commanded to put their right hand on their left forearm. That is one version of the narration. And there's the wrist and there's the hand. The second version, yes, he mentions here that it can be on the actual left hand, right on top. And there is a hadith in Muslim that says that. And it can be on top of the wrist and the forearm area, just about there. And that is also mentioned in a narration. All three of those are okay. All three of those are okay. Directly hand on hand, right onto the left. Hand on the wrist area going into the forearm, or onto the actual forearm. All of those three positions are correct. But then the question is, where does all of that go then? The right now is on the left, but then where does that go? So, it has been narrated that it goes on the chest. It has been narrated it goes under the belly button. It has been narrated it goes on the stomach, above the belly button. All of these kinds of narrations, they exist. And it is not absolutely clear cut. It's not clear cut that it has to be on the chest. The narrations that say it has to be on the chest are the strongest ones. They are the strongest ones, put the hands on the chest. But that doesn't mean to say that they are definitive. They are not. If somebody came along now and said, yeah, but I've seen the other narrations and I go with the one above the belly button, technically you can't argue with him. Not really much to argue over. Even somebody puts it around the belly button or just below, not a major thing to argue over. It's not a major issue. Because all of that is narrated and it is not definitive. It's not clear cut. Absolutely, it's on the chest and everything else is a bid'ah. It's not like that. There is nothing definitive that it must be on the chest. That's the strongest evidences. So that's what you would go with naturally, the strongest evidences. But if somebody comes along and says, no, but I've seen the other ones and I go with above the belly button, nothing to open up a huge conversation and debate over. Somebody even a bit lower than that, nothing to open a huge conversation or debate over. That is not a major aspect. So the chest is the strongest, but the other narrations do exist, and it cannot be said that the narration about the chest is definitive, such that anybody who doesn't do that has opposed the sunnah and you're wrong. And yes, the other narrations are a bit weaker, but it's not a clear-cut topic. It's not clear-cut that it must be the chest and nothing else. It's possible. It's possible. Those other positions could be valid. It's possible if somebody does them, so be it. It's not a debate to open up necessarily. So, based upon the levels of authenticity, you would then say from the strongest evidences is the chest. So maybe go with the chest, and that's where you go with the strongest evidence. So your right hand on top of your left on the chest. Again, what is the wisdom in doing that? What is the wisdom in placing the hands on the chest? Firstly, because we are following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, who commanded us to do so. Secondly, because that manner of standing is a manner, a posture that indicates or shows humility. Like when a small kid or a child is being told off and they stood in front of you, it's very common that they might stand with their hand on top of each other like this. Very common, because that is now a posture of humility and recognizing that you're in the wrong and you're low compared to the adult who's telling you off. So it's a posture indicating humility. So the scholars say that's the point of it. When you stand like that, you are standing in a posture that indicates your humbleness, your modesty, your humility in front of Allah. It's not a posture of somebody arrogant, somebody haughty, to stand like this. That is a posture indicating humility, indicating modesty. So that is the reason, or that is an explanation as to why that posture is like that. That is what some of the scholars have mentioned. And that's why when you stand, then yes, it is okay to slightly lower the head. Slightly to lower the head, because that goes with that posture of humility. لهذا ينبغي أن يطرق برأسه قليلا لكن قال العلماء لا يضع ذقنه على صدره. But you don't exaggerate and go like that, such that your chin is touching your chest. So you don't go so far down like this, as some people might do, to show their level of focus in the prayer and submission in the prayer, that they put their head completely down, the chin is touching the chest. No, not that far. But you lower the head slightly, and your eyesight is down to your place of prostration with the head slightly lowered, hands on top of each other like that, a posture of humility and submission. قال بعض أهل العلم, so the scholars, they said, when you're standing then, you're supposed to be looking at the floor where you're going to prostrate. The part of the floor where you're going to prostrate, that's where you have to be looking at. Not to your left or to your right, and you see many people praying and they're looking around, and there are some narrations coming up about how it is feared that their heads may be deformed or that the eyeballs may be plucked out. The ones who pray and they're looking around and looking around. You're not supposed to do that. Your eyesight is supposed to be down where you're going to prostrate. Or there is an opinion of some scholars which is that your eyesight can be just straight. It's an opinion that when you pray Allahu Akbar, your eyesight is just straightforward. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman. Just straightforward. But what most of the scholars have mentioned and what appears to be stronger and more correct is that you actually look down to where you're going to prostrate. To the place of prostration is where your eyesight is. Unless you are praying in the haram in view of the Kaaba, you can actually see it. Then in that case, the scholars say you should pray with your eyesight fixated upon the Kaaba. Some of the scholars, they mention if you're right there in view of the Kaaba, you can see it, not just in any part of the mosque where you can't see. In a place where you can see the Kaaba, you're right there, then you should pray with your eyes on the Kaaba. Some scholars say that. Some scholars have that opinion. So there are a hadith that mention about placing the eyesight down to the ground, and if a person is next to the Kaaba, then you can look at the Kaaba. But Sheikh Uthaymeen says his opinion, no. Even if you're there at the Kaaba, your eyesight should still be down on the ground where you're going to prostrate. Maybe that's where we'll stop on for today then. We'll carry on with the next section, which is now almost going to get to the section of what's the first thing you read. Because now you've done the Takbirat al-Ihram, you're looking down. The next thing is now you have to start reading. So what do you exactly read now? The opening du'as. That's where we'll start from next time then, inshaAllah ta'ala. Next week then, maybe about the same time, 7:30, 7:45, inshaAllah ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Any questions or anything?
Is there any evidence for having your arm by your side? I know some schools don't follow that. So is it from the Sunnah?
There is nothing from the Sunnah to do that. Remember, putting your hands on your chest, right hand on the left hand on your chest, that is it a pillar? Remember, the pillars of the prayer are, if you miss a pillar, you have to repeat the rak'ah, or the whole prayer, depending. Or is it an obligation? If you miss an obligation, you have to do the prostrations of forgetfulness at the end. With a rukn, you can't. You got to repeat the rak'ah. With an obligation, if you miss it, prostrations of forgetfulness. Or is it a sunnah? If you miss a sunnah, you don't have to do anything. So putting your hands on your chest, which one of the three is it? A pillar, an obligation, or a sunnah? It is actually a sunnah. So even if somebody prayed with their hands down by their side, the prayer would be valid, but they wouldn't get the reward of the perfect prayer. They're obviously opposing the sunnah. The sunnah says put your right hand on top of your left hand onto your chest area thereabouts. That's the sunnah. If you don't do that, you're purposely missing a sunnah, and your prayer, you won't get the full reward and proper reward for it. But there is no sunnah to keep your hands down by the side. It's a misunderstanding in the Maliki madhab. If you look at the seerah of Imam Malik, at one time when he was beaten to such a level on his arms and shoulders, he couldn't pick up his arms. It's in the biography of Imam Malik. He was beaten one time in prison or something, beaten with sticks and everything, and he couldn't pick up his arms from the beating that he received in this area and everywhere. And so for a while he was praying with his arms down by his side. He literally physically couldn't pick them up. And so then afterwards, from misunderstandings and miscommunications or whatever, it became known amongst the Maliki followers that Imam Malik was praying like that, and they started praying like that. from miscommunication or whatever it is, thinking this was a sunnah and Imam Malik was doing it as a sunnah, and it was never the case. And then you have the Ibadis in Oman and those places, they have that type of practice as well, but that is not a sunnah, to place your hands down by the side. Anybody else?
I have one more question. Is there any narrations to say that when you, if you're studying your role, you've made the intention to pray with behind the Imam, that whilst the Iqamah is being recited, you fold your arms and then do your takbir?
So it's done like this to hear the Iqamah.
Yeah, as in like you're looking at your tasbih and then you do your takbir.
I don't know anything about that. Never heard of that. Can check, but I've never heard that you do that. I don't believe there's any sunnah like that.
And regarding the narrations which mention, like if you look around in a prayer, like it's feared that your eyes will be deformed, or yeah. Would it be understood from these hadith that this is like a threat, so it would be understood as a major sin to look here and there during prayer?
Possibly a threat. It doesn't always necessitate it, but possibly. It's definitely a sin without a doubt. And the punishment there is severe. We're going to do all of that about how the head may be transformed into the head of a donkey and other things. They are severe threats. So certainly you wouldn't want to fall into that. Anybody else?
In Sheikh Al-Bani's book, Prophet's Prayer Scribe, he mentioned where an individual prayed below the navel, and the Prophet said it was incorrect.
There may be a narration. It's a weak narration anyway. That narration is quite weak, to pray below the navel, the one that affirms doing it. He may have found some narration like that too. He may have found a narration saying that it's impermissible or the messenger forbade him from doing that. Could be. But it's one of those topics where many scholars have researched and they've come to a conclusion that there's nothing which is absolutely definitive on it. You can't say that it's 100% it's on the chest, that's it. You can't say that. It's not possible to say that. It isn't 100% like that. There are other narrations which, okay, it could be a bit lower, it could be above the navel, maybe below the navel, okay, if that narration is authentic, then it's not allowed. But there is leeway. And it cannot be said it's 100%, it's the chest and nothing else. It's not definitive like that, the narration. It's the strongest, but you can't say 100% that's it, you can't do anything else. So it's not a topic to really argue over. See somebody with their hands just above, on their stomach area, you wouldn't open up that discussion with them. There's far more important discussions. All right, we'll stop on that for today then. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll carry on next week. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.